Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Point Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Dev.
And I'm Hugh David, your other co-host and co-producer. On today's show, we're going to be looking at the minute 7 from 6 through to 6 minute 59, as I've just had pointed out to me correctly. Joining us on today's show, we have Billy Holku, self-professed generic nerd. Welcome, sir.
Oh.
And so we are going to carry on delving into 1997's wonderful action / black comedy / drama / anything else we could throw in there. It's such a
rom-com.
Rom-com. I missed out rom-com. It's a rom-com.
Oh, criminal. After yesterday's conversation, how could you?
Yes, I know. Shocking.
So, this minute takes us from the very end of the conversation with Grocer, alluding to the Pacific Northwest, through a possible hit on a Greenpeace boat that Martin Blanc is unwilling to do because apparently he has scruples.
Well, we can talk about that in a minute, but you need to tell everyone exactly correct the mistake I made in the last episode, because I called it the Midwest and it's the Pacific Northwest, so that's me getting it wrong.
Yes, so this is one of those things that I picked up after rewatching this film several times, and really emphasizes why I love this whole dialogue between these two characters so much. Right at the end of the conversation with Grosse, kind of all switches around, and seemingly out of nowhere, Grosse's like, how do you like the Pacific Northwest, all the mist and that up there? Martin Blanc says, haven't been there in years. And Grocer comes back with this dog bark followed by like going boom.
Right.
And that whole sequence is fully explained in like an hour's time in the film when they're in the diner. But until that point, you have absolutely no idea what it is that they're talking about.
Right.
And in this scene, Grocer is basically saying, I'm watching you. I know what you are doing. I know your business, right? I found you here. And what's more is I knew what your last hit was as well, which we don't even know because that's prior to the film. It is when Blanc went up to the Pacific Northwest, and we find this out through the cafe dialogue.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I mean, my problem is I was too obsessed with the foreshadowing of where he's going, not where he's been. Yeah, good point. But it does still reinforce the idea that Grocer is keeping tabs on it.
Yes, very much so. And also feels like he needs to flex that.
Yeah. He creates an interesting guy when he flexes. You know what I mean? Like, he's not traditionally he didn't play the guy who flexes, but actually you go back and you look at like Blues Brothers and you look at certain points in Ghostbusters where he reminds Mr. Joe Ordinary, i.e. Venkman, that certain things actually, if you remember your science, should go certain ways. Yeah, and even in Sneakers, when he's supposed to be the nerdier one in the team and obsessed with conspiracy theories, but it's exactly those conspiracy theories that make him get angry about stuff and tell other people, you should be doing this or that. It's kind of interesting. Got a very interesting kind of flex that he has going for him.
Yes, very much so. You mentioned last time the fax machine in the car and the fact that it's printing in color. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little skeptical at that when you mentioned it last minute, and I thought I'd hold off until I saw it. You're absolutely right. That thing's printing in color. That's insane. Who has a color fax machine in a car? Like, even then. I just thought it was like a basic bare bones, like black and white telefax like he has in the hotel room, because that printout of Felix La Poubelle he has is like really grainy black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be like some weird 8-bit dot matrix kind of, reception.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm pretty sure it is. It looks like one of those. Do you guys remember the thermal paper ones they used to have in the 80s? Very like Spectrum and had one. And I mean, God, but the first ever PC I saw, which was a ZX81, had this silver thermal paper, and it printed into that. It reminds me a little bit of that, but it's still mad that it's in a car. Oh, do you think? I mean, considering we were saying last as one of the early episodes, we were talking about rentals. and whether or not, you know, and I'm just like, is that something they offered in LA to business people? I guess if you're in the business, I guess that's something you'd want.
I mean, I almost feel like at that level of service, you've got a chauffeur-driven car.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just bizarre, isn't it?
It really is.
So, and how much it would have cost?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
But then again, you know, is that his? I think that's his own car as well, isn't it? Really?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it is, but it's hard to tell.
I can't imagine any hitman driving their own car away from a hit.
That's true.
That's good. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
I feel like Hitman School 101 includes don't drive your own vehicle away from the hit.
But you also got to wear a completely black suit and a black shirt with a black tie and just look cool as
in LA heat, yeah, because otherwise you might be conspicuous.
Of course, yeah.
Might
look weird in LA.
I mean, but that's the weird. That part of what's weird about the film is it looks relatively timeless in that sense, though. Like the only problem with his suit is it's too baggy because it's 80s into 90s fashion. But Aykroyd's character, because of his casual, you know, like slightly working class-esque dress sense, is you know, people dress like that now. You know, it's not a big deal. So it's kind of that weird thing of these things that actually kind of don't go away.
That's an interesting point. Placing this film, it is, with I think 2, maybe 3 exceptions, very, very hard to place where it is in time. I think the cell phone is a bit of a giveaway. I think the music is the big one, right? Like it's the music is very definitely of the 80s when it's, you know, being played from the radios, all hits, all vinyl weekend. And it's very much of the 90s when you're anywhere else, like the hippo club scene, and in the hotel rooms. But other than those things, it really, there's not a whole lot going on in this film that places it in the 90s versus the 80s or the noughties, or even really the you know, 2010s, 2020s.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those films that you don't ever want to suggest to anyone they should remake, but you can see how it would actually work because people still have reunions and people still leave to go off from school to the army. And
every element of this works except for the fact that except for the music.
Yeah.
And I don't think you could make this film work in a modern remake because of the music. I don't think you have that angry punk kind of fierce independence in music style,
right,
in the noughties or the 10s.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although you see
that I think you need.
Although when you look at 90s music nostalgia at the moment, which is obviously very current and very big, and you just kind of think, oh god, maybe someone would think that. Speaking of which, by the way, I have just managed to find an NBC news report from Nightly News from 1995 talking about advanced auto technology, and it includes the facts in the car.
Wow. Awesome. But how long will it take? How long will it take for the facts to come through?
Well, looking at the version, the one they show you in the news report, it just literally just slides out, but it doesn't tell you when it was sent through. But yeah, isn't that crazy, man? 1995. Wow. I can't get my head around it. Like, what did I have in 1995 tech-wise? I was at doing my PGCE at Hull University, so I had an Amstrad for left over from the early 90s for word processing, but no mobile phones yet.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, all early days.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly couldn't afford one.
No, definitely.
But like you say, Bill, how long would it take for the damn facts to come through? It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. You're sitting there, it'll be like, oh, look at this high tech thing, and all you're hearing is the that telephone dial static.
Have you seen that meme that goes around where it's just like, in my day, the internet used to scream down the phone, "Yes, Grandma, that's okay. We're getting you to bed." It's so true, though. I can't explain that to the kids I teach. That there's the once upon a time you had this sound, and they're like, "What?"
Or the office will only have one computer that's actually got the internet on it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my god, yes. Like, oh dear. They just don't.
I mean, it's why the save icon looks like a save icon, right? Like, it's just a save icon. Like, I don't know what that thing is. That's just the save icon.
Well, who was it who said who brought out a floppy disk from their storage, and their daughter went, "Oh look, you 3D printed the save icon."
That's a great meme.
The thing is, I can believe it, right? I can absolutely believe somebody going, "Oh look," because they really don't know what these symbols are. They really don't. It's half of the fun of teaching these days is me trying to connect with them at least enough to be able to say, this is how this works. Oh, okay. So but back to the film for a minute. We're talking for the minute in question. So obviously I made a mistake yesterday and we've corrected that now, and we're looking at the whole business with Grocer, and then as we remind me, Dev, is this the point? Do we get Marcella on the phone just before the minute ends, or is it just after the minute ends?
We do get her on the phone. She does the whole welcome back to the old oak tree.
She's reading the thing
and
again.
We get through the Greenpeace
right
proposal.
Now the Greenpeace gag. Yes.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about that, either of you guys, or?
I find it interesting because I think narratively it's very much we're not entirely sure that he's a sympathetic character yet, so we're just going to throw this in there to try and help audiences buy that he's actually not entirely a bad guy.
It's so typically American, though, isn't it? I'm happy to kill whoever you pay me to kill, but I draw the line at doing what the French do.
Yeah, and I think that's a piece of history to speak to, Hugh, because I know you're much more familiar with that.
Well, I mean, for people who don't know, Greenpeace is obviously still around. They're a major environmental protection group, but famously in the 90s, they were using they'd only just at that point had ships for a while, and were starting to use these ships at sea to block or to make protests, and you could also ship it, you could place the ship in the way of things, and so forth and so on. So in 1985 originally was the first time that the French government used their own secret service to sink the flagship of Greenpeace, the Rainbow Warrior, when it was docked in New Zealand at the time. They were busy promoting. They were there to point out the fact that the French were looking to do nuclear testing on a nearby atoll, and so they were there to protest it. And then French Secret Service agents attached 2 bombs to the side of the ship below the waterline, and then the first one blew a large hole in the hull, and then after the first evacuation, some of the crew returned to investigate and film the damage. And then one of the photographers whose job it was that was his job he was an onboard photographer, returned below deck to grab his camera equipment, and then the second bomb went off. It sank 4 minutes later, and he drowned. He was 35 at the time. So the French government denied any involvement whatsoever, but eventually various bits of proper journalism, like the way journalism used to be, brought enough information to light that they had to admit to what they had done. And this was a massive. This both helped Greenpeace, but also put France in the dock in the International Tribunal. And in '87, they had to pay $8.1 million in damages to Greenpeace. Only the 2 agents who attached the bomb stood trial. None of their officers, none of their commanders, nobody who ordered it, not even the PM. So that's the reference. Hey, there's a job. The French want you to blow up a Greenpeace boat. No.
Yeah.
No,
and I think
scruples.
there was a lot of this period where a lot of governments, not just the French, but notably also the Japanese and to an extent the Americans, were very much trying to frame Greenpeace not just as eco-warriors or activists, but very much as terrorists.
Yeah.
And I think that was a sales pitch that much of the world that was inconvenienced by Greenpeace action was trying to promote.
Yeah, very much so.
As
Very much so. I mean, ANC were considered, and Mandela were terrorists. Everybody was a terrorist back then, frankly. And it's just interesting that you could argue I mean, it's not like other countries haven't done it, but the idea that you could bomb a ship that is there for peaceful protest in someone else's sovereign waters as well. I mean, I think that's the other part of the problem, is the New Zealanders going, what, how dare you?
And New Zealand is probably one of the most sympathetic countries at the time to Greenpeace's cause, and that led to a lot of the driving force behind this, because if it had been, in a British dock or an American dock, then I don't think there would have been anyone actually at the UN driving this kind of outrage in the same way.
Quite possibly. But it does speak interestingly to the American sense of what they like their heroes to be like. We've just seen this man kill people very effectively. And it's like, nah, draw the line at that,
No, yeah, exactly. It's like, pay me to kill anybody, but you know what? These people are probably doing some good. I'll probably leave them to it.
Yeah.
And also, he establishes that later as well, doesn't he? He goes on about how, like, you should look at the files at some of these guys. These are really bad guys. So he does have that kind of moral barometer there, that he's a hitman, but he likes to go for, quote unquote, the bad guys.
Yeah.
We never find out who these bad guys are, but
Yeah, that's true. But that is always the thing, isn't it, with American films? Is they take the notion of an anti-hero is not properly an anti-hero, because the anti-hero is always justifying to themselves why, and to the audience, why they're doing things. There are definitely films from elsewhere in the world where they just don't care. I'm thinking of my immediate thought is Doberman with Vincent Cassel and Monica Bellucci, where the guys doing the heists are just proper. They just don't care. Oh, look, someone got in the way. Boom, bang, let's go on.
Yeah.
There's a great scene in that film where the two cops as well, because they're plainclothes cops, are getting their lunch from a takeaway stand, and something happens to is it a baby, I think? And this bit, they're screaming, and the mother's like, help me, somebody, I need some help. And the parents were just standing there with their baguettes going, because they don't want to get involved. Like, that's an anti-hero. That you just, that you don't get that in America quite so much. But Armitage's films have come as close. I mean, Miami Blues is the other one that he did, and that's got a famous sequence involving somebody roughing up roughing up a Hare Krishna. Which became instantly legendary as a scene, because again, you just don't see that in American films. So. This was minute 7 of the Gross Point Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers and co-producers Dev Salagar and Hugh David.
Today's guest was Billy Holgu, self-professed generic nerd. You can find them on Instagram at Dim Sum Discussions for some gorgeous food pics, and us at All Good Podcast Players, also on YouTube, Twitter X, and Spotify at Debi Radio, on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it's Debi, spelled D-E-B-I, Radio. D-E-B-I, Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't